In this video, we're going to go through Gravity Form's form creation process. We're going to create a new form and we're going to go through each of the fields to determine how it works and how it's displayed on the front end. We're going to go through all of the standard form fields that are available with Gravity Forms, and then in the next couple videos, we're going to go over some of the more advanced things you can do. And so those are hidden fields, calculating fields, and conditional logic. So those are three things that we're going to be covering after that. So this is just going to be the standard form fields for creating any kind of form, from a contact form to an application form. So to create a new form in Gravity Forms, now that you have it installed, you're going to see this new Forms menu. And you can click on Forms to see all of the current forms in the system, right? And to create a new one, there's a link here that says Create One, and you can also just use the normal Add New button. And we'll give our form a title. And I want to kind of show you a lot of the fields that are available. So I'm going to go through as if we were creating something like a camper application form. So if you're running a summer camp program or something like that, and you want parents to fill out a form about their kids, right? So we're not going to follow that example too closely, but just in general, so I can show you some of the form fields that are available. So we're going to give our form a title, and so we'll say Camp Application Form. And you can optionally give yourself a form description and click on Create Form. So this is the main Gravity Forms interface. On the left is where you will see the actual form fields as you enter them. And on the right here are all the available fields. So there's standard fields for text and other things. There's advanced fields, which are pre-formatted fields. So something like an email address where it checks that the information entered follows a certain format. Post fields, which is for allowing users to create content on your site, but I'll talk about the alternative that we follow on Left Eye Press, but those are there. And then we have pricing fields, which is for products and stuff like that. So we're going to go through these one by one, and let's start with the advanced fields, because we're going to kind of follow that example of a camper application form. So to add fields to Gravity Forms, you can either drag and drop them, or you can just click the button and it should show up. This is the standard interface. As you can see, you can drag and drop fields to reorganize them. And when you hover over it, you can click on it to open up the details. And there's two icons at the top here next to our expanding toggle. This one is to duplicate a field, which you might use if you're setting up like a lot of checkboxes or something like that that have a lot of the same fields and you don't want to re-enter them. You can just quickly duplicate fields, or if you have a lot of single text, sometimes it's easier just to delete to duplicate them. And then we have the delete icon, which obviously just deletes the field. So a lot of these are going to look fairly similar. You have an example of how the field is going to look on the front end. You have a general tab, which gives you the field specific options, an appearance tab, which gives you some control over how the field is displayed, and an advanced tab. So for the moment, we're going to pretty much stick in between the general and appearance, and we're going to cover the advanced in some of the following videos. So first we have the field label, and that in this case is this highlighted name that's in bold here, and that's just going to be the name of the field. So that's the base title of the field, and in this case it's name. And if you change this, you'll see that it automatically updates up here, and then you can optionally put in a description. And that's just for some, help text for the user entering it in if it's not very, obvious what the field is. And then we have this field specific options. And in this case for name, you can choose which fields you want to show here. So if you wanted the prefix or middle names or suffix, you can add in fields for all of that. We're just going to keep it first and last name for now. And then the rules down here, we can make this field required. So that means that if a user has not filled out this field and they click that submit button, they're going to get an error message that says, this field is required. You need to fill it out before you can continue. So we'll go ahead and make that required. And then under the appearance, we can put in placeholders. So here we have our title, and we have our sub-labels here, first and last. So a placeholder is something that will be in the input field itself. So if we wanted to put in an example of what people might enter, we can put in John Smith for the name, and it will appear in the input field, but as soon as they click and start to type, it'll disappear. So it's just to kind of give them a sample of what should be in the field. So those are placeholders, and then we have description placement. So if you put in a description, you can determine whether it should show up above or below the input. So right now it's below, so you can see this is the description that I typed in. And if I go to appearance now and I say place it above, you can see now it goes above the fields. And the same thing with the sub label. We can put them above or we can put them below. And then custom validation message is if they enter it in the information incorrectly, if you want to change it from the default of, this is a required field or something along those lines, you can put that in here. But Gravity Forms has pretty good default error messages, so you probably won't need to use that. And custom CSS classes we're going to deal with in a later video, and that's just a way to kind of style form fields and make them inline and stuff, and I'll cover that in detail. So for now, we have our first and last name, so that's pretty good. It's required, and now we will say we need your address. And similar to the name field, this has the different options that you can enable or disable. It also has an option for the United States address format, the Canadian address format, and then the international format, depending on where you are or where your target market is going to be. You can enable and disable the options individually, and you can select the default country. So that country will be selected in this country dropdown. Here, it will be selected automatically. So if I wanted Albania to be my default country, you can see that when they load the form up, Albania will be pre-selected. So if you may have people from other countries, but generally everybody's going to be from, let's say, United States, then you would just go in here and select the United States, and it'll just save them 2 seconds, And we can also choose whether or not to make this required. Under appearance, this is all going to be pretty much the same information for each field. You can choose placeholders and sublabel and description. So we won't have to go through that with every field. So that's our address. Now we have the parent's name and their address, and let's say we want a phone number. And this is similar, but we have a little bit different. We have the American style with the area code and 7 numbers, and then we have an international format for everybody else. My preference normally actually with phone numbers is to just use a single line text field, which I'll go over later, which is basically they can put in anything into this field, just because this is the field I think most people make a mistake on, because some people enter it with parentheses around the area code, some people don't, different lengths and numbers and all kinds of stuff. Some people put in country codes when they shouldn't, some people don't. So I just like to have a single line text field which allows them to enter in anything, and that just kind of saves them the trouble. But if you wanted to put in a good description and specifically tell people that you can use this phone field, it is useful. Specifically, if phone number is very important for whatever information you're grabbing. But I find that the single line text is easier for the end user just to kind of drop in their phone number or not. And this one has a new rule here, aside from required, called no duplicates. And what that means is if somebody puts in their phone number here and then somebody else comes along and puts in the same phone number, it will give them an error. So you're only allowed unique input into this field, or your users are only allowed unique input. So this is a good way for preventing people from using the same email address or the same phone number or something like that. So that's what no duplicates is. So we'll keep our phone number field, and then we'll go back to advanced fields, and we'll say, website. This isn't something you'd really ask parents, but let's say that we wanted to, it's an IT camp, and so we need an example website as well. And this field just checks to make sure that it is in a URL format, so it adds in the HTTP automatically, and then something like www.yourname.com, and it checks to make sure that that format is correct. So that's our website field. Email address, always an important one. This one has an extra checkbox for enable email confirmation. So this field will check to make sure it's username at the domain, so it'll make sure that it's an actual email address format. And the email confirmation forces them to enter in their email address twice, and this just makes sure that they've entered it in correctly. So the system will check to make sure that these two boxes are both our email addresses and also that they match, and we just make sure that people don't do typos and we have the correct email address. So that one's quite handy. So that's our email address field, and then we'll do these ones. Let's just say their birthday. So this would be a date field, and this takes input in the form of a date. And there's a couple different options. You can either have a date field, which allows them just to enter in a date drop down, which allows them to select the day, the month, and the year from a drop down field. And my favorite, the date picker, which pops up the little calendar interface, and they can pick the date straight from the calendar. You can also optionally put in a little calendar icon next to the field. And then the date format, because we all have different date formats depending on where we are, you can select which one makes sense to your users. We can make it required, and we can also do no duplicates if we'd like. So that's our date field. The time field is fairly similar. You can use the 12-hour or the 24-hour clock, and you can change the labels that represent hours and minutes. And then if we go to 24-hour, you can see our AM and PM disappear. So that's a good way to get times. That's good for scheduling appointments or anything like that where you want them to enter in a specific time. And then we've covered these. So we have our file upload. So let's say that we want a recent picture. So if we're picking kids up at the train station, we want to know what they look like so we can make sure to find them. And that allows them to upload certain files, and those certain files are dependent on which you enter in here. So the default image ones would be as shown under the field, JPEG, GIF, PNG. That covers most image files on people's computers. PDF files for if you're collecting documents, if you need people to upload a driver's license or some kind of signed document, then we cover PDFs. And you may want to cover Microsoft Office files, so something like Microsoft Word and Excel. So we put in Doc and DocX for the most recent Microsoft Word versions, and then XLS and XLSX, which is the Excel file formats, the new and the old one. So you probably choose some variation of those depending on what you want to allow them to upload. And the reason we pick specific files is we don't want the system to allow them to upload something, for example, like a PHP file, which is what WordPress is written in, because they can run scripts or something like that. We just want to make sure that they're uploading the specific kinds of files that we want to be able to run. You can check the box to allow for multiple file uploads, so they'll upload one file, and then if they'd like to, they can click add one, add another, and upload multiple files. You can dictate a maximum number of files, a maximum file size, and you can make this field required. The next we have a list field, and this is good for if they're going to be adding in one or more items and you'd like to get that in a list format. So let's say that we wanted to say children that are coming. And what that would be, so if we wanted them to list out the children that they're sending, could be one or more. And there's this other option here that says enable multiple columns. So if you click that, it gives us 3 columns by default. You can add another by clicking the plus sign. You can delete one by clicking the minus sign. But what we could do is we could do something like first name, last name, and age. So these are all single text inputs, so it can't be like a drop down or something like that. But it's a quick way to get some quick information, and then if they wanted to, if they had a second child they wanted to send, they would click this plus and it would give them another row so that they can enter in. So it's just a nice way to have kind of a repeater field where they're going to be entering in multiple bits of information. Or we might just have, if you just wanted the one field, you uncheck this box and it would just be one column. You can give them a maximum amount, so if they can only send up to 5 children, you could put 5 in there, and that would limit them at 5. They would no longer be able to add any more, and we can make that field required. And again, we can put we can change description placements and stuff like that depending on which field it is. And the last is CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA is the spam prevention, which gives them an image with some numbers and letters, and they have to type it in correctly. I'm going to put a text description on how to set that up because it requires getting keys API keys from Google. So I'll put a text description on how to get that. But once those keys are set up, you would just click that and it would add in a CAPTCHA. So we'd want to put that right above our submit button. Or the last field, because the submit button will be added automatically. So we would put this CAPTCHA button as the last field in our form. So that's all of our advanced fields. Now let's get into our standard fields. So the single line text one, that's probably one of the most flexible. It can basically be anything. They can enter anything into this field. So we could just say, you know, what's your child's favorite color? They can basically just, you know, enter anything into this field. So it's just if you have a bunch of questions or you have a bunch of input and you're not entirely sure what they're going to enter in, then this is just kind of a default field and they can enter in everything, and it's for shorter answers. And we can make this required. We can set a maximum amount of characters. We can put in placeholders. So this is a fairly flexible and generic field. And then we have paragraph text, which is similar to this, except it's for multiple rows. So we're expecting them to write a decent amount in this field. So this is usually good for something like, you know, additional comments, or for a contact form. This would be your main field that they would fill out to actually send you a message. So you'd have like the name field, or a single line text for name, an email address field, and then this paragraph text field, and that's it. That's a contact form. And we can make this required, set maximum characters, all that good stuff. These next four, which are Dropdown, MultiSelect, checkboxes, and radio buttons, these are ways for users to select one or more options depending on the type of field it is. So with Dropdown and radio buttons, right, in these two options, they can only select one of the available options. For MultiSelect and checkboxes, added it twice. For MultiSelect and checkboxes, they can choose one or more. So the options here are fairly similar as far as how you'll set these up. You can enter in your choices, you can delete them with the minus, you can add more with the plus. There's a little radio button here, and when applicable, this sets the default choice. So I have a drop down here. You can see first choice is what they'll see when they load up the form. If I click on the second choice, radio, you'll see now check second choice. Or if we go into appearance and we put in a placeholder, please select one, then that is the default. That will become the default. So the placeholder trumps any selection down here for which one is our default. We could say something like, you know, how are you arriving? And then type in car, train, or bus. And then they can select one from the drop-down. So that is our drop-down, and also there's this show values, and I'm going to get more into that when we talk about calculating fields. But essentially, if each of these options had a numeric value and that number was more important than the actual choice, this is where you would put that. So these options can represent something else, and it can be text as well. So it could be something like, you know, dropped off for train, pick up at train, pick up at bus, you know, something like that. If you wanted to see a value when you got the notification email, which will list out all the entries, you can have it show you the value so you immediately know what it is. It can also have a numeric value, which we can use in calculations, which I'll show you in a bit, something like that. We can also, there's a bulk add predefined choices, which has some of the popular things like countries, you know, age, gender, marital status. So a lot of the fields that you might be putting in a drop down or a select are in here. So check those out if you're doing something that seems a bit standard. So that's our drop down field. And next we have our radio buttons. And again, this is for choosing just one of the available options. And it works similar to the drop-down, except they can see all the options right away, and they select a radio. And if they, just like our default choices, so you can only choose one here. So if I choose another, it removes my choice from that. You can also click this enable other. So if they click other, they can then type in their own choice, which would be something custom. Otherwise, that's fairly similar. And then we have our multi-select, which allows them, if they hold down Control or they hold down the Apple key on Macs, they can select one or more options from this list. So they can see them all, and they can select a few options if they'd like. These options all work the same. And then our checkboxes, which again is just like these checkboxes shown. They can click on one or more options. So this could be, what are your child's favorite animals? And it could be tiger, lion, bear, and they can have more than one. So that's our selection options. So these four fields are fairly similar, except these first two, drop down and radio, allow you to select more than one. Allow you to select only one. And the multi-select and the checkboxes allow your users to select more than one option. Now we will get into our number field, and this is, just as you'd suspect, it only allows the user to enter in a number. You can change the number format, you can make it currency, and you can also add a minimum and maximum range. And this field can also be used for calculations, which we'll cover in a bit. And we can make it required, we can put in a placeholder, all that fun stuff. All right, and our last three in this section, HTML. An HTML block is used for inputting some kind of text in between form fields. Now, it's an HTML content, and HTML is hypertext markup language, and it's the basic code for designing websites, the basic kind of structure. And then there's CSS, which controls a lot of the styling. But for this block, this is a very basic HTML block. So really, it's mostly used for entering in text. So if you had a couple paragraphs, let's say you had a terms and conditions before they submit, and you wanted to put the terms and conditions in here in paragraph form, and then under it, we would have maybe a checkbox with just one checkbox. So we would remove these, and we would say, I agree with the terms and conditions, and then we would make this required, and that means that they won't be able to submit unless they've checked that box. So it has to be selected in order to continue. So let's say yes. And then the HTML content, we could put the actual terms and conditions text in. So that's really what it's used for. It's used for putting in some text in between fields. And then our last two are similar, and these are ways to break up fields. So a section is just going to kind of put a line. So we could say up here, we could say this is our first section, and we'll say, personal contact information. And then we could put in a second section and move it up to here after our personal information, and we could say, other, or MISC information or whatever, and that's just going to put kind of a section heading in a line. So it's a good way to break up fields. But you can also, if we wanted, instead of a section, we wanted to have it be a multi-page form, then we can click page, and once we do that, it's going to say this is the first page, right, automatically, and then end of page. So let's say that we wanted after the contact information, so before child, we wanted this to be a second page, and this is saying it's the end of the last page. So you can add as many pages as you'd like, or you can add as many steps as you'd like, but this will break it up. So if I update this now, and I preview my form, you'll see I have 2 pages, so it says step 1 of 2, and then it has the initial information, and after my personal information has a next button, right? And that'll bring me to the second page. So I'll just type in John Smith here, since the name field is my only required field at the moment. I can just show you what this next. You click next. Now we have 2 of 2, and we can see that we have our other options. I can go back, or I can hit my submit button. So that's kind of how that works. So that's how you break up larger forms into sections and or pages. And then we have our post fields. Now, the thing with post fields is that what it allows you to do is create a form using Gravity Forms that allow people to submit, let's say, blog entries to your website. However, for this kind of functionality, we actually recommend a different set of plugins. And the reason for that is it allows you a lot more control over how that content is displayed. It allows you to put in lots of different filters. So the plugin called Cred, which is just one part of this kind of suite, which allows you to handle custom post types and content from your users, does the form submission. But having that types plugin and that views plugin also adds a ton more functionality. So we don't really recommend using the gravity forms option, not because it's bad or it doesn't work, but simply because normally when you're looking for that kind of functionality, you're looking for other the same functionality that's in this plugin suite, and so we want to make sure that you're setting it up properly. So this does work very well if you just want them to be able to submit content to your site. But we want to make sure that permissions are set up correctly. We want to make sure that they can edit their content or manage their content afterwards and all this other stuff, and we want to use the types toolkit for that. So if you're interested in that functionality, go back to your functionality list and add in custom post types as a functionality for your list. And even if you're not creating custom post types, which would be something like a classified ads or some kind of content that isn't covered out of the box with WordPress, even if you're not using a custom post type, you can use the views plugin, which allows you to control how entries submitted by users is displayed, and also Cred, which allows them to submit the content in the first place. And there's a lot of other cool things with that, so check that out. But if you want to ignore all that and you wanted to use a gravity form, then these are the fields, and they match the fields, just like adding a blog entry. It's the same kind of fields, so you can sort those out. And our last item is our pricing fields. So there is a way to calculate input when we're using gravity forms, so to calculate a total or a number based on the input that people put in, and we'll cover that in the next video. But the pricing fields are something that kind of has that built in. So I'm going to start a new form for this. And so let's say that we wanted a product order form, and we create that form. And for this, now this isn't actually paying for a product. Now you can do that with gravity forms. You can have some kind of pricing fields, and when they submit the form, they'd be brought to example to PayPal, but that's done through an extension, and we'll cover that in a separate video. So in this part, we're just going to create the form and have it come to a product total. And then later on, if you wanted to do that, you can check out the PayPal video or the Stripe video for actually checking out through a form. But it's fairly straightforward. It's fairly simple. We have a product field, which allows us to, let's say we wanted to sell a t-shirt, and we can choose whether it's a single product or a drop-down product or something like that, and we can change the price of that product, depending on how many options we have. But these are all pretty similar. Drop-down radio button, that means that you can have multiple options. Hidden calculation we'll cover later. There's a user-defined price, and this is nice for if you're a charity and you want people to be able to send you donations, but you don't want them to have specific amounts that they have to send. You can let them enter in a price, and that's what this user-defined price is. But for now, we'll just do our single product, and we're going to sell a t-shirt, and we're going to say that t-shirt is $10. And let's disable the quantity field for now because I want to show you the individual quantity field. So now we just have a quantity field, and you can add in min or max, and you can put in a drop down if you wanted to put in specific available options, but normally it'll just be number. If you have multiple products, this drop down field, you can select which product you want it to apply to, which is how what's going to be used in the calculation. So now we have our product field, we have our quantity field, and let's say we have an option field, and let's say that this is going to be size of the t-shirt. This wouldn't really work if they were ordering more than one, but let's just say we want an option. And so we'll say small, medium, and large. And with this, we can also enter in a price difference. So if the price changes, if the price is added to based on these options, so if the small was an extra $5 and the medium was an extra $3, then we can put those price changes in there. And we can also determine, we can allow them to say with checkboxes, select more than one, or use radio buttons. We can add in a shipping field, which is a cost for shipping. We can have multiple shipping options by selecting drop down, or we can have a single method. And let's just say that if you had radio buttons you can use for, they can only pick one option, but there's multiple options to choose from. We can use radio. Drop down is the same kind of thing, and then, or just a single method, which is there's just one shipping option. And let's say that our shipping is $5. And then we have a total field which calculates it all together. So if I update this form and then preview it, you'll see that we have a t-shirt, its price is $10. We enter in the quantity here, so let's say we want one t-shirt, and you can see shipping is $5, so the cost is 10 plus 5 is 15. And because it's small, it has no extra charge. Now let's say medium, you can see it goes up to 18, large, it goes up to 20. So this is kind of automatic calculation for a product, let's say a product order form. And you can see you can set it up multiple different ways depending on how many products you have or how many you want them to be able to order. That's all in there. In the next video, I'll show you how to do calculations based on any of the fields that work with calculations. But for now, that is all of our standard fields. So now we're going to go into the settings part. So now let's say we've completed our form, and we're going to go into settings. And if you have Gravity Forms extensions, you'll also see additional menus here to configure the settings for that extension. But for now, we just have form settings. This is the basic settings for the form. You can do global layouts. You can change the submit button text, things like that. So you can read through that. Those are just general options for each form. So the first one is we're going to be covering is confirmations, and you could create multiple confirmations and use conditional logic, which we'll go over later. But for now, we're going to look at the default confirmation. We have three options here. The first is to show them some text, so just text after they fill out the form. The second is to redirect them to a WordPress page on your website. And the third is to redirect them to a specific URL. And you just enter in the URL there. So that's just a basic kind of confirmation type. And what the conditional logic is that we'll go over later is you can have multiple confirmations, and based on their input, you can either show them a message or redirect them to a page or something like that. So depending on how they filled out the form, you can do the confirmation different. And notifications are email notifications. So the default one is admin. You can also have multiple emails go out with or without conditional logic every time something is sent out. You can do send to, and you can have the admin email, and that's going to send the email to the email address under settings general, the admin email address. You can also just enter in an email address here. And that's for if you wanted to send the email to somebody who's responsible for getting them. You can add in the from name, the from email, and you can actually customize the email that's sent. So this all fields, that's going to send the output of the form. Everything that was entered in, it's going to send them everything. But you can also customize this email. And how you do that is you type in what you'd like, and then you're going to use this down arrow here. So I've typed label name, and then I can go here and I can type in, well, this is my other thing, but so let's just do, quantity. And then if I click here and I click on my quantity, it'll show the quantity next to my label. So you can use these kind of short codes or merge tags to enter in the form fields how you want, or you can just do that all submitted fields and it'll show everything. And this is the conditional logic part, which we'll go over in a minute. So, or the other kind of notification you can do is if you wanted an email to go to you, but you also wanted a confirmation email to go to the user, we can say user confirmation email. And in this case, we would say select a field. Let me just create an email field. So if I create an email field here, so when they order, they're going to put in an email address, and I go back to my notifications, you'll see before it said that I didn't have an email field. If I select it here, now I can select my email field. So we could say user confirmation, and then whatever email address they enter into that field, that's the email that the notification will go to. And again, you can edit and manage the email that's sent and include whatever information that you'd like. In order to edit the field, that's our edit tab. If you'd like to view submitted entries for this form, you can click on entries. And if you'd like to preview it, you click on preview and it'll bring it up. And the last thing is how to insert our completed form into a page. So let's just create a new page, and we're going to call it order page. And after you've installed Gravity Forms, you'll see this button above the default editor, and you can click this, select your form from the drop-down, determine whether or not you want to show the title and description. We do want to enable Ajax on our forms, and then click Insert. I'm going to remove these two. And then if we publish this page and take a look at it, we'll see that our form now shows up. Now, when we're doing our front end, we're going to be using Page Builder, so we're not going to insert our forms this way. However, for now, it's good enough just if you want to see the forms on the pages and get everything kind of organized and play around with the forms and test them, this is how you'd insert them. But I'll show you how to insert them with our page builders later on. But you can see now we have our completed form and everything is working kind of as expected. So we have our total, our email field, the whole deal. So that is how to create a basic form and the different fields that come along with Gravity Forms. Check out the next couple of videos to see some of the more complex stuff.